I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-founder of Denver Startup Week. This week is so important. It's important for us to come together and think big and boldly about our future, to dream and have visions for companies. These companies that are built today will be our economic strength, our economic drivers, and our economic saviors for the future of both our region, our state, and our country. We don't take it lightly. Come together during this week and make things happen. Before we dive in, we want to say a special thank you to our 2020 Denver Startup Week sponsors who make it all possible. Thanks to our title sponsors, Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Zero. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible. Battery 621 and the Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Help, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to all of you this week. Thank you to Wix, Kenzen, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors. They're all listed on the screen. Thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, make things happen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Skoke, and welcome back to Denver Startup Week. I'm the Region Manager for Middle Market Banking at JP Morgan Chase in Colorado. We're thrilled to return as title sponsors for Denver Startup Week for the 9th year in a row. From COVID-19 to the social unrest that has rippled across our nation, it has been an unprecedented year. But I'm confident in our resilience and couldn't be more proud to be part of this Denver community. In Colorado, JP Morgan Chase has been a part of the Denver Startup Week family for almost a decade. Throughout the years, we've donated millions to local nonprofits. These nonprofits help lift up businesses owned by minorities, women, and veterans. Our commitment to entrepreneurs and small businesses, especially those in underserved communities, is part of our everyday DNA. JP Morgan Chase has built its reputation on being there for our employees, our clients, and our communities in the most critical times. And today's unprecedented environment is no different. We realize that our actions during this crisis are essential to creating an inclusive recovery and building a more equitable future. During the pandemic, we mobilized efforts to help our customers as we continue to make banking easy, efficient, intuitive, and safe. In February, JP Morgan Chase made a $7 million donation for a global career readiness initiative to give Denver's underserved students access to higher education and real-world experiences. Our goal with this initiative is to equip students with the experiences that will lead to well-paying, in-demand jobs. I'm also proud to share that our employees have worked around the clock to provide critical relief to businesses affected by COVID-19 through the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program. We help provide financial relief to more than 6,200 businesses in Colorado at an average loan size of $110,000, totaling over $685 million. As a firm, we've taken steps to address the racial, social, and economic inequalities facing the Black community. With long-held racial wounds recently reopened, there is no room for silence or complacency right now. And as a community, we must all fight against racism and discrimination wherever and however it exists. As part of this, JP Morgan Chase's local leadership team has recommitted to creating a more diverse and inclusive culture among all employees, including the 1,300 employees who live here in Colorado. We've also joined Inclusive Economy, a Colorado initiative that brings together local businesses and CEOs with a commitment to diversify our workforce and inspire other businesses to do the same. To close, there's so much inspiring work happening in Denver, and we're thrilled you're here to be a part of this week. Like in so many examples of creativity and innovation that's happening in our world today, the Denver Startup Week team has worked tirelessly to bring all of us incredible content, people, and ideas to help you and your businesses thrive. Thank you, and enjoy this week.
Hi, Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, CEO of Food Maven and a co-founder of Denver Startup Week. Thank you so much for taking part in this incredible event and being part of this community. I want to welcome you to Founding Techstars and Taking Companies to the Next Level, discussion with David Cohen. You're in for a great discussion with one of the best in the startup world, founder of Techstars and an early investor in some of the biggest tech companies in the past 10 years, David Cohen. I'll let our moderator do the full introduction, but I just wanted to say how influential David has been for me personally, as I was an early employee at one of his portfolio companies, FullContact, and do more faster was required greeting. I even have this picture of him rocking the infamous FullContact wing bandits at South by Southwest just a few years ago. Our moderator today is Wendy Lea. Wendy's a leading expert in digital innovation strategy and ecosystem development. As an experienced CEO, board director, and strategist, she advises governments, public-private partnerships, and global enterprises on growth through innovation. Wendy is an active mentor and advisor for tech accelerators and leverages a global network of entrepreneurs to drive economic resilience. She's currently serving as CEO of Energize Colorado, and Wendy mobilizes resources and relief for small businesses, nonprofits, and individuals recovering from the economic impact of COVID-19. I doubt that Wendy remembers me, but I sent her more than a few prospecting emails when she was the CEO of Get Satisfaction as leading growth at FullContact. I never did make that sale though. Well, with that, here's Wendy Lea and David Cohen.
Thanks, Ben. Cool picture. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that is a cool picture, isn't it? Awesome. Well, hey there, David Cohen. What's happening, my
Hey,
friend?
Wendy Lea, how are you?
I
Long
know.
time no talk. It's been probably a day or two.
Maybe, or an hour, who knows? Well, let's kick into gear. That was an awesome introduction. Again, thanks for that, Ben. And I want to say what a cool opportunity this is for me personally to be in conversation with the David Cohen, the founder and managing director of Techstars. I think it's gonna be fun. I think for the audience, for those of us who have the good fortune to be involved in Denver Startup Week and who listen and engage in a lot of these sessions, I want to set up a couple of opportunities so you can orient and listen and ask questions. I'm going to I'll go through an introduction. Once that's done though, my own special introduction of David, I have 3 sections of this end conversation. One is going to dig into Techstars, the origin story, the secret sauce, ethos, all the things we love about your global organization and those things we've followed and we've engaged with over the years. So that's going to be first section. Second section, we're going to tap into David's expertise, his wisdom relative to the current state of entrepreneurship. And there are a bunch of questions we're going to go back and forth on, but I want to tap in to how he sees entrepreneurship, not just in our state, but in the world, because he has that kind of exposure through Techstars. And then we're going to wrap up around the Colorado ecosystem. And I think you've been such a key part of that, David. I think it would be good for all of those watching and listening to hear your point of view on what's working, what's not, and how you see the future of our very strong entrepreneurial ecosystem. So those are the 3 buckets. So you can kind of tag those as an audience. I'll do my best to stay on track. Relative to Q&A, David and I both do a bunch of these virtual sessions. So we're very comfortable with chat. And we'll do our best to pay attention when questions come up. We'll mainly steer towards the end, but if there's something juicy that we see, we'll stop and take that because that's just how we go. That's how we roll. So don't hesitate to interact with us that way if you would prefer. And I guess that's it. What have I missed? I think that's it. that's kind of the flow, and encourage Q&A. And I will officially kick off with your bio, which I think is awesome. So those of you who don't follow David's blog should. I do, and I learn a lot when I take the time to read it. And David, thanks for creating that content for us all. But I was looking at his obligatory bio. I always say, like, let's get beyond LinkedIn or the obligatory bits. I would just say in a nutshell, and I'll let you add whatever you want to about yourself, since you're a very self-aware guy. I would say you've had a wild and crazy lifetime of business building and investing and leading, because Techstars is a very large, global, complex organization, right? A couple of different parts of it. And also the author in you. I think that's pretty cool. Like that along the way, you wrote 2, or was it 3 books?
2. I mean, it's Do More Faster, first and second edition.
Okay.
There've been lots of other writing, but those are the published books. And
Yeah.
I mean, my reaction to all that, Wendy, is cool. Let's get past all the super uncomfortable part where you tell us amazing stuff about me, which people know is not necessarily true.
I know.
Well,
it is true. You just don't like talking about yourself.
That's exactly right.
True.
Yeah. So let's just jump in, because
let's jump in. So I want to hear, and I'm sure others do, and so probably many have already heard this, but for those that haven't, talk about the birth of this big idea called Techstars. Like, where were you? What were you thinking about? Like, give us that depth.
So, this is 2006, just for timing, when it started. And we ran the first accelerator program, which wasn't called an accelerator back then. It didn't really have a name in 2007. And, where I was in my own journey was I had that one job interview that I had in my life, which is a story I often tell. And I had gotten a job and decided, that's not for me. I want to start companies. And that began my sort of career starting companies with David Brown, who's the other David at Techstars. It's really powerful because we can just go around and be David at Techstars, and it seems like we're everywhere, but we're actually 2 different people.
That's so true. That's so true.
But, it was building a few companies, having, some success, doing a little angel investing after that success, having some failure, had a company that failed as well in that time period. And, I think just being dissatisfied with what angel investing was, the notion of, showing up in a coffee shop and meeting somebody and writing a check and not being that involved until they needed another check, just didn't feel satisfying. And so, there were 2 motivations in that moment in time, right? One was to, make Boulder as a startup community and more broadly Colorado, just better, right? To have more stuff going on, because that was, self-serving and my ability to do angel investing. But also just to try to invent a better way to do angel investing, right? So it was both build the community and do it better. So that was what was in my head, and that was what I pitched to Brad and others at that time.
Okay, cool. And it seems to me, and again, I was around then, not living here, but I remember well when you first, put on the whiteboard in the office of where I was working at the time, this whole idea. And even then, it seemed like there was a distinct cultural ethos that you were working with. I don't remember exactly how you framed it. I now know, of course, how I feel about it and how engaged I am in it. But talk a little bit about that, about, thinking about not just culture generally, but how you wanted to be with each other and how you wanted to be with the community and with your entrepreneurs, because it's pervaded everything you've done, it seems, your cultural ethos.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in our past experiences building companies, we had realized how important it is to be clear about what you care about from day one, as a business. And, for us, it was, let's help entrepreneurs succeed. I mean, we've talked about that for, 14 years now, right? We want to help entrepreneurs succeed. We get excited when they win and they succeed, because they change the world. They make the world better for all of us, right? And to have a role in helping them succeed feels great, especially if you can scale it. So, today what you might know is give first, which is the ethos that we're sort of primarily associated with. Certainly not something that we invented. There's a lot of give before you get in the world, but it's something that we believe in,
Yes.
and maybe help turn it into a hashtag and all that stuff. But I think it's something that's very pervasive in Colorado, which is to not think about the help you're giving someone as a transaction, but just to think about it as, let me give something to them, and the universe might give me something back, or it might not. You don't know what that's going to be or when. And so, we brought people into the organization, into Techstars, and as we've scaled it past 300 people today, we continue to focus on that, where it's people who want to help entrepreneurs succeed that come in with this attitude of, it's not a transaction, it's me helping you, and the network is the power. You see it working at Denver Startup Week, you see it working in the Colorado ecosystem, and it's really how we built our company as well.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly it makes me proud wherever I am, to hear the mantra of Techstars used very personally, by investors or mentors or entrepreneurs, like they created it. And that just means it is part of them too. And I think congratulations to all Techstars leaders for making that so, right? Because you can't just put it on a card. It's not just a hashtag. We're so over that. It is something that you are part of.
Yeah, you have to live it. And, there's, you're one of them. There's 8,000 mentors, right? There's many thousands of alumni that have been through the accelerators. There's, attendees of events, 100,000 a year, right? That sort of come to these events. And I think that is really the community making it happen. And it's really, the only reason they do it is because they attach to the value system, right? They believe in that ethos, and it is their organization, right? We're just, helping sort of be stewards of it, right? And I believe that the mentors, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the community leaders around the system are what makes that work, really. It's really about them.
Well, let's go to mentors, because, they are volunteers. We are volunteers, I should say. I now, for the first time in my life, I'm leading a volunteer organization, and I've learned a lot. And I often think about how Techstars worked with us as volunteers, as volunteer mentors, right? So what do you, other than attaching to the value system, which is clear that that's an essential thread that keeps all of Techstars mentors together, leaning in. What else do you think it is that keeps us, myself, and 7,000 others around the world coming back to help over and over and over for each new program, be it in a city or on behalf of a corporate sponsor? What do you think that is?
Yeah, we ask them a lot of times, what is your motivation for being involved? And there are a lot more that want to be involved than we can even have involved. Right? Because at some point you just run into limits of practicality. I think that for some of them, it's just this sort of learning, right? They're around, these highly energized entrepreneurs with new ideas and new approaches, and they can share their experience. But what they get back is they get to observe, right, what works and what doesn't work. And like any good relationship, it's two-way. It's not the mentor's on a pedestal and they know everything and they're going to tell you what to do. It's they're contributing, hopefully, to your success through their network, right, or through their experiences that they can share, which we sometimes call advice. The best advice is when it's an experience they've actually had that they're sharing. Many of them do it for that, just literally the learning. Some are looking to find their next opportunity with an interesting company, right? We saw SendGrid, right, the first ever company that IPO'd from any accelerator, going through the Boulder Techstars program, Jem Franklin, right, hung out and mentored, and he ended up being the CEO for quite a while.
Right.
So, I think that type of opportunity is there. And then the networking with each other, right? It's a great group of people that get to know each other and have something meaty to work on together, as opposed to going to another, event or party together, which they get to do a lot.
Yeah. I would ditto that. Again, being involved since the very first city accelerator, again, not called that, but in the very early days, for sure, learning was high on my list. And it was like every entrepreneur I met was smarter than the one before, but with a different frame of their smartness and with a different level of ambition in the way they expressed it. And I remember, I mean, that was it's important to me to this day, you know, to be exposed to that and to learn from them. Also, I think you teach best what you most need to learn. So when you're teaching or advising and sharing the experiences we've had, it reinforces, were they really as good as they sounded, right? Or are they as current as they should be? So I think that the mentor angle dimension of Techstars is spectacular. It's magnificent, not just in terms of your business model, but it is that it continues to expand and connect, right? And build a massive body of connectivity across the globe. And I don't know, I would just say kudos for keeping that important as you have grown from a very small organization to a very large global one.
Yeah, it's a big part of the focus, right? Where you have, 500 companies a year going through these accelerators and all this activity. The way we think about it is the goal of all that is to help the entrepreneurs succeed. But the vision of all of that is to allow everyone to contribute to their success and also to allow everyone to benefit from their success. Yeah. So the mentors certainly contribute, and then it's on us to make sure they're also benefiting. Again, it might not be financial, it might not be direct, but they're getting something out of their success with what they're, whether that's learning, new relationships, investing, getting a job, whatever it is. Everyone wins when the entrepreneurs win.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. And I guess two other bits in the Techstars piece before we go to what you're seeing globally and what entrepreneurs can learn from your exposure and your experience and scaling companies. Let's a little bit, I mean, it seemed obvious to me that your extension into communities, I mean, you were building a startup community in the early days. That was a main focus area. And that was so beautifully done here in Boulder. And then I could see how those startup communities and Up Global mattered to that ability to scale that. But that was a natural opportunity, I think, for Techstars, going back to everything you've described about your big idea and how it grew and the ethos of it. So what about when you got involved with corporates? How did that shift things for not just the organization, but in your mind, your view of helping entrepreneurs succeed? Because you were putting them in a different set of conditions, yes?
Yeah, and
Talk
for a
about
while,
that a little bit.
Yeah, I think for a while it was a struggle to really understand, what that equation was, right? I think that it was pretty obvious that, attaching another powerful set of constituents to the network, right? These large corporations. I mean, early on we were working with Microsoft and Nike, right? Amazon, Barclays Bank, Cox Cable,
Right
Comcast,
yeah.
all these big organizations. And there's value there, but you also have to be careful that it's about the entrepreneurs, right? And so I think what we learned over time is that you've got to work with partners that share the ethos, that want to see the entrepreneurs succeed. And we had to hone in on that a little bit. Most do, but they also are very concerned with their own success. And the ones that have that same give first attitude, Wendy, right? It's like, well, if I can help them, I'll get something out of it. And my example of that was always, what if Uber had been in the Ford accelerator, right? We work with Ford too.
I know.
They would have been close to that company. They could have invested. They could have really, been involved early on rather than just feeling disrupted by it.
Yeah,
so, it's powerful to have them involved because they do business with the small companies, the startups, and it's network extension. It's really amazing people with a lot of domain expertise. But for us, we really just viewed it as another way to scale our investing activity.
For sure.
Right? That's driven us past 500 companies a year going through these programs, because we find these partners that have this shared ethos and want to contribute that investment capital as well as that sponsorship, right, of the activity, and kind of give first into it. So it's been a really powerful model for us to sort of grow our footprint and access more opportunities to invest.
Yeah. And I love the extension of the network. I love the diversity and bringing in corporate folks, those that are very entrepreneurial minded, those that aren't, but they're still inquisitive and they've leaned in and co-investing. I love that. I've loved that part of your growth, by the way. I think it's been very interesting, very informative. And I've seen the difference that it's made for corporations, right? The Heritage Group and many others. I use that one because I went and joined, Lisa, and was a mentor there. And I was amazed with just how they were influenced by the process. It was really impressive to see.
It takes it back to that vision, right? Like, help the entrepreneur succeed, but how can everyone contribute and benefit from that?
Yeah, that's
not
right.
just the entrepreneur, but everyone around them that can help them.
Yeah, so kudos for that shift in your model and that the broadening of your reach through that strategy. So let's go to this current state of entrepreneurship. So I had a bunch of things on my mind, but let's start with the reality. This is Denver Startup Week. We've got a load of founders in the audience that have been with the week all, interacting in these sessions all week, and now eager to hear your point of view around what's happening and what you're seeing relative, not just to financing, although that's top of mind for all of us who need more capital to continue to grow, but talk a little bit about your point of view and how it shifted, like when you first wrote about it in your blog, I think in April, and then you updated that in August. I'd love to have you share that with the group.
Sure. So I think what you're referring to is on my blog. Yeah. There's sort of, Techstars is unique in that it's extremely high scale, right? If we're not the highest velocity seed investor in the world, we're pretty close to it. People argue about that, but we do a lot of investing, right? And 500 companies a year. So we see a lot of data. So in any given month, pre-COVID and pandemic, right, we were seeing, 20, 30 financings kick off and 6 or 8, sort of M&A deals kick off. And it's been really interesting to watch that and how it's changed, both in the US, but also globally, in our, in the world where we have very real data and we can actually see these transactions flowing. One of the unique things is we know when they're happening, which is well in advance of knowing when they're closing, right? Or when they're sort of made public. So we can see the trends pretty early. And, on my blog, I've been publishing some data out of Techstars. So one of the things that you see is that, M&A mergers around the March or April timeframe, just literally just went to zero. There's always a drumbeat, and the world stopped for about a month. And everybody said, okay, nothing new. The data that I shared is when the transactions are beginning, when we're learning that they're in process, right? So that's better than just knowing when they close, because it informs, like, what are people doing today? But if you look at that data, then it immediately goes back to the clip it was at before, right? And the implication there is, the Googles, the Salesforces, the Microsoft of the world, right, that are professional acquirers, they just got back at it, right, pretty quickly. They took a breath and everybody went home to work, and nothing new happened for a month there, but then they said, wow, big opportunity. With financings, you see something even more remarkable, is that it just doesn't slow down at all, right? You would think that people would get, a little gun shy and sort of wait to see what happened. There's not a beat is missed. You do see valuations creeping down a little, not a lot, of the financings, but the pace of them just totally interrupted, and it's global that's the case. And part of it, the implication there is people are, maybe they're a little more afraid of the stock market than what your startup is going to do in 10 years or 15 years, which is a different time frame to think about.
Right.
So maybe they're pulling money out, maybe they're investing in funds or startups. There's a lot of dry capital out there. So, the net is you can't control it, but it doesn't seem to be changing much.
Yeah, that's important for us to hear. Although when you need it and can't get it, money, risk capital, it feels constricted. But the patterns are the patterns, right? And they've now become trends. And I'm glad that you publish that data and make us all aware of it, because it's encouraging, right?
Yeah, there is always, going to be people who say there's not enough capital.
We always say that. We always say it.
Of the 7 capitals in the startup community way, right, that Brad and Ian wrote, it's the capital we all think about all the time. It's not the only one, but that'll always be the case. But the reality is there is a lot of capital in the market, particularly for seed stage and particularly for growth stage, that has been raised and is ready to be deployed. Angels get a little bit gun shy here with the stock market going crazy, but
Yes, we do. Yes,
that's
we do.
that's flattening out, and it's just not in the data that's any different than it was a year ago.
Yeah, good. Good. Thanks for that. So let's dig into innovation in COVID time. I mean, how many blog posts have I seen about this? I hearken back to early days of Techstars, 2006, 7, and 8, and there was Uber and Twilio and SendGrid, and I was fortunate enough to be involved in your fund at the time, and those were all in the cohort, right? And so what are you seeing now? I mean, there's a future of work stuff. I love seeing Taylor's, accelerator around that, Macklemore. I mean, I love that. I think there's all the healthcare, the changes in healthcare, but generally inspire us or inform us around categories of innovation that you guys are working with now that you see have real upside.
Yeah. So, I think that the first I think about it in the macro, right? Like,
Yep.
There's some crazy things going on, right? We've got, multiple sort of, changes in the environment, right? Some good, some bad, right? And I think when there's change, there's opportunity. So just like you were saying, we've all seen the advice about, what to do, during the pandemic and how to think about your startup and, whatever the advice is. And early on, we had a lot of founders, and CEOs just coming to us. I mean, like every investor, we talked to all of them. It was a lot of them to talk to. And, what they told us is, got it, we hear the advice, but like, should I keep going? I'm a little worried. I'm, fearful. Is this a good time to even try to do a startup? And so I try to share some perspective. I've only been investing for about 15 years. But I got together pretty early on in the pandemic, a bunch of people that have been, investing for a long time and starting companies for a long time. And it is an amazing time to be starting a company or building an early stage startup because a lot of people are going to not do it. And that's just going to give you a head start and a lead against them. 2009 was the tail end of the last kind of, recession or sort of big, trauma economically. And, in that 1 year, I think we invested in 4 unicorns. I mean, we've never invested in 4 unicorns in 1 year, even as we scaled the system, right? They're easier to see. There's less competition in that moment.
Well said.
Capital flocks to it. Employees flock away from things that are quitting into the most interesting things. So I think the sort of hopefully inspirational piece is if you can keep at it, you have an advantage right now in all the sort of things that are going on. And, whether that's to your question, right? Healthcare, being delivered remotely, obviously we should do more of that. Education and any of us that have, kids that are, doing home education, we know there's a lot of room for improvement. The things that have generally been resistant to virtualization,
Yes,
right, are big opportunities because there's really no reason, other than our need as humans to be in a room with each other, which I don't have because I'm an introvert. I like this better. But I think that, those things that have been resistant, those are interesting areas to kind of focus on.
mm-hmm. And just overall customer experience too, because consumers now will have different expectations. Yes.
I don't think, we're all on Zoom all day, every day, right? Hopefully Zoom and others will innovate massively. I've been going to events that feel like I'm in a real event, right? And
yeah, me too.
Those are super cool. I think there'll be experiences like this, whether it's Zoom or someone who does it, that are much more emotional and present. And maybe finally we break through with some, VR and things like that.
Yeah, I agree, because that really hasn't come forward yet. It's always on the fringe. At least I see it that way. You may not. I want it to come forward because I want different experiences, right? I think consumers do, both to learn and to consume, to buy. I want different experiences.
Exactly. And I want them at home, or I want them where I live, because, before this, last year, I haven't been on a plane, right, to go anywhere this year. Right. And, I last year would have, had 75 flights by now. That's a lot of time, right? That's a lot of time. And that time hopefully is valuable for all of us that are spending it on airplanes and in hotels. I can be a lot fresher at a board meeting when I'm, just rolling out of bed and sort of focused on it with coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
So there's room for a lot of efficiencies that I think entrepreneurs will take advantage of right now.
Yeah, I agree. So let's stay in current state of entrepreneurship. We have one more section after this around our own home of Colorado, our innovation ecosystem here, but let's stay current state. So dig in a little bit on your strategy, Techstars strategy around inclusivity. I mean, I saw you early, I had the good fortune to serve on the board, and I saw you and David and the whole leadership team take very specific decisions to be intentional about shifting and really looking at your internal world and your external world differently relative to diversity and inclusion. So how do you see it now? How do you see that playing out for entrepreneurship as a whole?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the high level, I'm extremely hopeful because the conversation is at a level that it has never been before. And I think that's really good. You and I have a mutual friend, Jerry Colonna. Many people on the call know Jerry.
Yeah.
The first question we ask ourselves is a thing that he encourages you to ask yourself a lot. How am I complicit in the conditions that I don't want to exist, or that I say I don't want to exist? And so, the thing you have to do as a company is to look inward and say, okay, we're part of the problem, right? We can do better. How have we failed? What can we do, not say, do, right? That will be judged, 10, 20 years from now. What impact can we have? Because we're not going to go out and fix police reform as Techstars. We can all individually contribute to whatever we want. We're not going to fix a lot of the fundamental issues, but we can do our part in our swim lane, right? We can.
Well said.
We can do better at whatever it is you're doing, whatever I'm doing, and whatever everyone who's watching is doing. And so look inwardly, ask yourself what you can do. So what we did is we there were sort of a quiet, 7 or 8 kind of commitments that we made publicly, but we decided very consciously to only talk about the things we've already done, right? So there are many more things we're doing that aren't done yet, and they're hard, that we're working on, and we'll talk about them when we do them, because we want to do, right, and not just say, we care about this and we have zero tolerance or whatever, right? And so, we've done these things, and I don't need to go through what they are. You can read about them if you want to go to techstars.com. But if everyone would just do that, right, it's not a PR moment. It's a moment to talk about what you're going to do differently in the next 10 or 20 years to help fix these, problems that we have.
Yeah, I like the reference, and I feel that deeply. It resonates with me, that the notion of doing, not just talking about it. I mean, because as long as we're all doing something every day to change those conditions, again, in the swim lane, you just talked about your swim lane. We have our swim lane, Energize Colorado, around small business. Then over time, change will happen as long as we're consistently doing and iterating and doing again. At least that, I hold that belief. So it's good to hear you encourage that way of thinking and acting, I should say. So last question on current state of entrepreneurship. I mean, this goes back to my view of you as a colleague and a friend, is that you have extraordinary instincts relative to not just product chops, and understanding and how to build products, but also founders that you think can actually do that. Again, not just talk about it, but work with it and iterate it and build teams around it. So how did you hone those instincts? Was it just shots on goal? I mean, talk about that, like where that comes from and how you've improved it over the years.
So I think it is largely, the 10,000 hours thing that we've read about, right? It's just, you do it enough and you fall on your face enough and you see what doesn't work, and you get spidey senses and instincts about people, were they put on this earth to do this thing? Is the passion real, or is it being faked?
Yeah.
And you're going to be wrong. And by being wrong, you get data, right back. And so I think that's a big part of it. Like there aren't that many people in the world that have invested in a couple thousand companies through an organization, right? It's you learn how to make that decision. And there's a book called How We Decide that I think is sort of captures some of this, where you use instincts for big decisions, right? That you don't have a lot of data on.
Right.
So that is a big part of it. But I think at the same time, I like to think of myself as someone who can think about 10 or 20 years from now, and what the world will be like. So at heart, I'm just still in my mind, a kid that loves technology, playing with his Apple IIe, right? Back in the day. And I could see back then, like, wow, this is going to change everything, right? And sort of got there early with that mentality. And you can see that in other things that are emerging. So it's maybe a combination of having done it a lot and sort of hopefully having good instincts about where the future goes.
Yeah, and I think I would describe you as a student of the game. I mean, that's not a sophisticated phrase, but you are. I see you as a student of the game, and you get to be that student because you have such a broad range of folks that you're around all the time. It is the nature of what you do. So I think that helps you reflect on your choices and what you're seeing and what you're not and how that's shifting. But it's very impressive. I just want you to say that. I think you have extraordinary character, but you have really good instincts, and
but every time you show me a SendGrid, a Twilio, an Uber, right, a Classpass, I'll show you, an event view that you were on the board of with me.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't
well, there's
work.
that. I know.
And so, but I think they were great people, right?
Absolutely.
And I think they ended up helping the startup community, right, very broadly, and doing other things. So I feel great about that. But, for every success story, there's also a moment you learned, right?
Yeah, of course. That's the nature of life on this crazy planet. Okay, let's come home to Colorado for a minute. We've got 12 minutes or 13, 14 minutes or so. I've fallen in love again with this state, and it's so fascinating to come back after being away 15 years, as you know, and seeing how developed this ecosystem is, right? So many different entrepreneurial support organizations, call them what you will, but lots of people and entities leaning in to ensuring innovation here is spectacular, and that companies can be started, can be funded, great mentors are around, et cetera. I mean, I'm really blown away by it, although I'm just still learning all the pieces and how they fit together relative to entrepreneurship. But weigh in a little bit. Let's start with how you see it now. You were core, you were foundational to its development, right? And what do you see our strengths are now and some of our weaknesses? Kind of just be straightforward about that, so folks in the audience that are involved or want to get involved can understand your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a complete world of difference, right? I mean, again, I've only been investing for 15 years. I've been here in Colorado for 30. So I sort of saw most of it through the lens of the investing activity, some through, just my entrepreneurial stuff. I really like the, the Startup Community Way model around the 7 capitals. If you haven't read the Startup Community Way, a great way to think about your ecosystem. Think about the 7 capitals of your community, right? And Ian Hathaway, who works at Techstars, Brad Feld, of course, who's my co-founder at Techstars, but an incredible venture capitalist in his own right at Foundry Group. I think they wrote about this stuff, and I was thinking about it in context of Denver Startup Week because 10 years ago, the Denver startup community was very hard to find. It was, there were a couple people that kind of maybe were connected to it. Now it's so incredibly organized, right? So quickly it changes. And it's the entrepreneurs who lead and the people that support them that make that happen. But, the 7 capitals, so there's intellectual capital. Are there great ideas coming out of Colorado? Are there, really big thinkers? We could be better there, right? I think we have some. I mean, you see things like Boom, right? Supersonic. I think that's so cool. Like this big ambition, happening here. But a lot of the things we see are a little more incremental still, right? So, that intellectual capital, I think we have the smarts, but sometimes we're not shooting for the moon as much. Financial capital, you've got a few, venture firms on the national stage. What I'm really excited about on the financial capital side is all of the new funds that are emerging. Funds like V1 VC, Range Ventures you may not have heard of yet.
Chris, he's involved with us. Chris Erickson's fantastic.
Yeah, Matchstick, right, that Natty does.
Awesome.
Service Provider Capital, Tahoma, Hannah Gray you may not have heard of yet, right? There's so many new funds that are emerging that are run by fantastic people. I mean, that's really cool because those are the venture firms of the future that, I think we're in good shape on financial capital. It's available. People know that good companies are built here and they'll invest here. Human capital, we see people moving from the coast like crazy, especially.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
I can't, if you know any realtors around here, they're just really busy, right? With people coming from the coast. So, obviously you're seeing entire companies, decide to be in Colorado. But I think, maybe there's some skill sets that are still sparse, like, consumer marketing, right? It's just sort of hard to find people that are really
I agree. It's not our jam here yet. Yeah.
And I go through all of them, but I think, network capital, things like Denver Startup Week, the community is tangible, accessible, Startup Weekend, right? Techstars, these are examples of networks that we have here. Great culture, right? The cultural capital of Give First. It's very pervasive in Colorado, very open door community.
Very generous. Yes.
So we're in pretty good shape. And it's why we're always in the top, 5 or 10 of VC deployed in this country. Yeah. But it's just getting better and it's really cool to watch.
Yeah, I'm really happy that Ian and Brad broke out all those different kinds of capital. I mean, that really helped. It helps me when I'm assessing ecosystems, how they fare against those different dimensions. There's one question I want to go to, babe, in the chat. Says, because we were talking about networking, right? What does the future of networking look like? I've been using LinkedIn a lot more lately. Seems like some are and some aren't. Any advice for building networks? Perfect question for Denver Startup Week. Finding mentors virtually. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, we at Techstars in May, we ran a process called May Madness. And we thought about how are people going to behave differently and how's that going to affect our business and how's it going to affect our portfolios? And one of the things that came out of that was that social networks are going to get smaller, we believe. So, in the past we had this sort of idea of networking like crazy, get everybody's card, join them on LinkedIn, but you don't really know them, but you kind of have this big network, right? And it just goes deeper into the quality relationships, I think, in the future. So I think the implication is, people are going to want smaller networks. There's this great migration in this country, people moving out of cities into, places that are more into nature and working from wherever. So there's going to be very tight, smaller networks within the big networks, right? And so when you sort of apply that to your own life, it's, what relationships do I have that I can make more meaningful, right? And I think that's an opportunity in this moment versus the breadth of just having a lot of relationships.
Yeah, I like that, to be honest. I mean, I would, because I'm all about relationships. I think good business is about good relationships, but I never have fancied how many followers or, whatever that happened when that happened. And I was kind of in the middle of it, so I participated in it. But it's like, how many of those people do you really know? How many people are you really helping? Right? I mean, not just like be my neighbor in Boulder, but I mean, to me, the reciprocity, and not tagging it that way, but that flow, that exchange of value is more important than ever, I think, for all of us.
And it's a core, I mean, it's one of the reasons, like, as we've scaled Techstars as an example, right? We've stayed with 10 companies per location per year with one managing director. Right. That is a family. That's 30 people. Like, everyone knows everyone. They are connected for life. It's extremely deep in terms of relationships. Those people will probably start companies together in different combinations in the future. And, we like that scale model because it does have that family feel. And it's not, let's bring 400 companies into a room and try to pretend we can help them all at once, right? So I think people can think about their own business and their own way of, connecting to others, where it's really about the people that you get deep with, not the quantity, but the quality of it.
Yeah, that's right. Right. I totally agree. So a couple of more, these are important, I think, in the spirit of Denver Startup Week. What about Palantir, Amazon, and Wix coming to town, and in some cases sponsoring Denver Startup Week? I know Wix has. Does that concern you when large tech, whether they're IPO'd or not, come? What does that drain our available talent for entrepreneurship, or does it even attract more really smart, technology-oriented founders and employees? So give me a point of view on that.
Look, it's got its pros and cons, right? Like anything. I think I don't view it as some horrible thing. I think it's great. I think having things that attract people to the community is great. The story of why Google is here in Boulder, right? Where we're listed in. They acquired a tiny little startup, and now they hire all the engineers, and the cost of an engineer is higher. But a lot of engineers move here and eventually leave and go into the startup community. So, it's a part of the system. It's not an enemy. It's a friend, right? And you can get benefit out of it. It has some effects. A lot of people in California call me and said, sorry, that's happening, right? That Palantir is moving there. I said, no, it's actually great. I think, it'll create a new kind of skill set, right, in the community. And, there are some wealthy people that will come out of that hopefully will invest in the community.
Right on. I agree with that.
Totally. So, it's like anything, there's good and there's not as good elements of it. But, overall, I think, it's there, and let's lean into it.
Yeah, me too. I'm on that side of the fence. I was curious about your view. Let's talk about rural versus front range a little bit. Something that I am learning more and more about, how different the startup communities are, yet there's also a lot of crossover. And I love the idea of the integration of all entrepreneurs that are building products and services, next generation, et cetera, coming together more and more. But what have you seen relative to that pattern? Front range entrepreneurship versus rural. Do you see the boundaries diffuse now? What do you think?
Yeah, we know that talent is equally distributed and opportunity is not, right? That's true in our own state, and it's true in the world.
Right.
I think that people like Mark Nagar, right, with the Greater Colorado Venture Fund, doing amazing work, right? Mark spent a lot of time in Telluride working in that community with others and has built this fund. A lot of that is about connecting. I think that if you were here 10 or 15 years ago, you would know that, and but others watching, you would know that Boulder and Denver have this real rivalry.
I do.
Right? Like I would never come to Denver Startup Week 15 years ago. Where's Boulder Startup Week? Now we think of ourselves as it's Colorado. Like that's how the rest of the world sees us, right? As a state, a region. They don't really care, about the difference between this city and that city. So it helps us all when, there's a large company that gets built somewhere off the Front Range outside of that corridor, to point at and say, look, that's happening. It helps us all to have a fund that can do that, or multiple funds that could do that, and people focused on it. And what we all can do there is really cross collaborate. We can show up for Mark in other cities, right? In Telluride or wherever we need to be, whether that's virtually or actually, when we're hanging out there, show up for the startup community. And it's a big opportunity. And they are, in a lot of ways disadvantaged, don't have as much capital or as much attention, but, that can be fixed over time the same way as we integrated sort of the Front Range in our program.
Right on. And Eric Matisek in particular shared with me kind of the beginning of Startup Colorado, that entity, and it was Colorado Springs and Fort Collins and, trying to get those cities kind of integrated relative to startups. And then it continued to expand. I think that's when Stephanie was leading OEdit for the state. And, there was an emphasis put on rural. So you can already see, once I understand the history, the shift. I think we are, as leaders in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, taking more of a maximalist view to this, right? Like the more, the better. And that's going to impact the resiliency of our economy going forward, right? Not being siloed, being very integrated.
And it's happening. I also got involved with Endeavor, Colorado, right? And that's finding scaled companies. We're finding scaled companies all over the state. that want to give back and keep, promoting the overall entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Yeah.
So it is happening.
Yeah, I'm real glad Endeavor's here. You and I have talked about that. I think they're an amazing organization. They're global. I got to know them in Louisville, but I was always very impressed by the nature of the work and just how they supported their later stage entrepreneurs. Yes. And I know we have been, and we have so many organizations like that. And I think we're all in one tent, right? And we all have specific roles and responsibilities, but I like the idea of the greater good of all of that system and what it can do for the resilience of our economy. Well, I think that's about it, my friend. How are you? Are you exhausted? Or no? No, you're good.
I'm good. I feel a lot of energy these days.
I know.
Maybe it's because I'm an introvert, but I'm like, let's go. So
No,
I'm going to check out the next thing after this.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I mean, really, thank you very, very much for investing some time to prepare, and also a full hour, not just with me, but with the hundreds of people that are dialed in and observing and learning from you. And also just deep respect for your leadership, not just in Techstars, but really around the world, encouraging other accelerators and other cities and states to lean in to entrepreneurship as a form of economic vibrancy. I mean, you really had a big impact on Cincinnati, when I was there. And I'm grateful for that. And I want you and your colleagues at Techstars to continue to lead the way. I think entrepreneurship is the future of our economy. I feel that way. And I think it's folks like you and Brad and many others inside Techstars that are going to accelerate that whole view.
Well, hold up the mirror too, Wendy, because Energize is super cool. It's super cool to see the incredible people jumping in to help Jared and sort of get us back on the path to recovery. And what you're doing is amazing too. And I think that's Colorado, right? People just jump in.
I know.
It's really cool.
I mean, who knew, that we could pull this off? Okay, but that for now. Thank you so much. You have a good afternoon. I'm going to go take a little walk around the block. Thanks to everyone in the audience. And thanks again to Denver Startup Week for all their awesome work. And with that, we'll sign off just 1 minute early. Not bad.